My name is Darcy D, and if you're a singer who experiences flipping, cracking of the voice, today we're going to talk about reasons and remedies. Why your voice flips, understanding the coordination breakdown. One of the most frustrating experiences for a singer is when the voice suddenly lets go. You're singing, things feel fine, and then suddenly the voice flips, cracks, disconnects, or collapses into another coordination. Most singers think this means they've run out of range. But most of the time, the issue isn't range, the issue is coordination. Before we go any further, I want to clarify something. Falsetto, as in flipping, is not bad. Falsetto can be a beautiful stylistic choice and an important part of a singer's toolkit. What we're discussing today is not whether falsetto is good or bad. We're discussing the singer who wants a connected transition from chest voice into head voice, but experiences an unwanted disconnect instead. What do we do? The transition reveals everything. One thing I've learned from analyzing thousands of voices is that every vocal tends to reveals itself in the transition. The transition exposes imbalance. That's why during vocal analysis, we deliberately use exercises designed to reveal the singer's natural tendency. When you go from chest voice into head voice, on a vocal phonation, and something happens in the transition. Where that something happens usually reveals A, where the transition is, and B, what the tends to is. Are we blending, which is what every singer wants? Are we pulling chest? Are we flipping? Which is today's topic, and it happens in the transition. So for this is the transition for the baritone. This is the transition for the bass singer. This is tenors and altos right here, and this would be the soprano. So this piano is showing you where your transition may be for your voice type. So the transition reveals the imbalance. And that's important because most flippers aren't incapable of singing through the transition. Their current coordination ability simply leads them to disconnect almost every single time. The voice flips when the coordination can no longer stay balanced on the approach to and through the transition. Some common things that happen to singers and especially flippers are some things that I'm going to explain. And if you fall into one of these categories, then this is definitely for you. The handoff. The transition tells the truth. For most people, everyday speech is dominated by the TA or thyroarytenoid chest voice muscle. Now, the chest voice muscle is a large muscle that's responsible for the sound that we make in speech level. 1, 2, 3, this is the chest voice muscle being active. And typically when we sustain the speech in chest voice, we feel the vibration in chest. It's very sympathetic, thus it's called chest voice. So what singers commonly recognize as chest voice coordination. As pitch ascends, the chest voice muscle must gradually reduce its dominance, it must release its grip, and allow increasing contribution from the cricothyroid muscle, the head voice muscle. So as the vocal cords converge with the mental demand for pitch increase, the vocal cords are going to get smaller and longer and more natural tension, and the head voice muscle is going to take over. This balancing process allows the voice to remain connected through the transition. It's a handoff. So when we go the chest voice muscle begins, releases into the transition, the bridge, and the head voice muscle starts to contribute. And we get this balance handoff. So the use of the muscles that allow us to control the pitch, it may be out of balance. If the TA reduces its contribution too quickly, the CT or head voice muscle may not yet be contributing enough to maintain a stable connection. So let me repeat that. If the chest voice muscle reduces its contribution to the sound-making process too quickly, the head voice muscle may not yet be contributing enough to maintain the stable connection. The result is often a flip, a crack, or a disconnect. And that's what's happening. If the chest voice muscle refuses to release its dominance, the singer often compensates by pushing harder. Eventually, the coordination just reaches its limit because the chest voice muscle can only stretch so far before it has to hand off to the head voice muscle. And then, so it can no longer sustain the pitch demand and suddenly lets go. So then when we start to push harder using the chest voice muscle, it'll eventually just let go. Probably pull chest first, but it will eventually flip. Again, the handoff is lost. So it's a different imbalance, same system. Another symptom of a flipped voice scenario is the high larynx and the flip. So another common contributor to flipping is excessive laryngeal elevation or high larynx. Many singers attempt to reach higher notes by lifting upward. The throat tightens, they look up, and the chin follows and the larynx rises as well. We lose the coordination, we lose the balance. So let me talk about this a little bit more. If you know where your Adam's apple is, you got to find the little bump in your throat. You put your finger on there and you just speak out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you make those inflections, you'll feel the larynx, which sits at the top of your trachea, and the vocal cords sit on top of that. So this is when you touch this little bump here in your throat, you're actually touching the vocal folds. And they sit this way in the throat and they come together like this. If this larynx, if you just put your hand here on your throat and swallow, you'll feel your larynx go up and back and down again, so it's moving. And if you keep your hand here and do your falsetto flip, you feel the larynx come up. So excessive laryngeal elevation is one of the strongest predictors of disconnect. And it's common for many singers who flip. If I used an octave scale right over my transition, that would be a slightly raised larynx, taking me to a flipped position. Is a balanced position. So when I learn to help balance the larynx, the vocal cords stand a better chance of staying connected, providing an adducted tone or a connected tone. This doesn't mean that we permanently force the larynx downward, but in training and in exercise, we may temporarily exaggerate a slightly lower laryngeal posture, like a dumb, dopey yawn sound. So when you yawn, if you put your finger on your Adam's apple, you feel the larynx come way down, and it's a really dumb, dopey sound that in exercise we're going to use temporarily. So if you're a strong flipper, which means your head voice muscles are not used or accustomed to contributing to the noise making process, then if you lower your larynx and walk through the transition, and we always we use semi-occluded or non-articulate shapes and sounds like a lip bubble. Really practical way to warm up the voice, find the pitch, memorize the pitch, balance the breath and the vocal cord closure, and it allows us to find a consistent sound. When we lean dopey into that, we really eliminate the flip factor. So if I'm just going and flipping, if I was to lower the larynx, place my fingers at my cheeks to teeth where they come together, and drop the jaw, keep your tongue attached to the bottom teeth and say the word like book, and then do it like you're yawning. So then it would sound So as dumb as that sounds, I've eliminated flip. And you take this as high as comfortable. Never assist, Never try to force it into a higher position. You slowly massage the connection. And the sound can only be created by lowering the larynx. It's an imposition downward. If the lowered larynx does rise a little while ascending in pitch, so if this is neutral speech level, this is dopey position of the larynx, and this is slightly bratty, it comes up a little bit. If we remain dopey and we happen to press up against that, it's going to only neutralize. So the pitch will remain connected and balanced. And if you have to encourage an extreme dopey stance to eliminate your flip, that's fine. But just remember somewhere in the back of your mind, as soon as humanly possible, you want to alleviate the exaggerated dopey sound. So instead of you may until eventually it's just neutral. You found a way to release the chest voice connection and to enlist the head voice connection in a balanced way so that through the transition, both of those muscle groups are contributing a balanced connection. This becomes a great tool for flippers to experience that balanced connected tone. And although it's exaggerated, the singer's able to experience transitioning without excessive lift and or disconnect. And that's the win. And again, over time and as soon as humanly possible, the dopey exaggeration should be neutralized. Sometimes exaggeration in training helps the singer discover balance in function. So there's other ways that we can test this. Now, sometimes for singers that flip, it's that they haven't used a connected tone head voice position like they typically would go, so they're not accustomed to connecting that. Now, we know that when the larynx starts to lift too high, the vocal cords are going to disconnect, or they're going to have a large challenge staying connected, closed, adducted. So one of the ways we can check this is by doing the thumb test. So sometimes singers don't realize how much upward gripping behavior is developing before the disconnect happens. So here's a simple awareness exercise. Place your thumbs underneath your chin behind the chin bone like this. And what you want to do is you want to press the flesh to the muscle, the mylohyoid, the tongue muscle, which you experience here. And if you press the flesh to the muscle and swallow, you should feel a downward tension or pressure from the tongue muscle against your thumbs. And when we swallow, we know if you put your hand on your larynx and swallow, we know that the larynx lifts. So if you place your thumbs here and gently press the flesh to the muscle, and as you exercise, whatever the exercise is, and I like to use on this exercise or on this demonstration, a short staccato exercise. So if this is the roof of your mouth and this is your tongue, you do this, right? You gently clench your teeth and you close your lips. You're not going to let any air into your mouth. Any air is going to come through your nose. And you're going to use a short staccato. It's like a squeaky door hinge sound. And you're going to touch each note with the same intensity and as short as humanly possible. And while keeping your thumbs here, so all the noise, all the activation is coming right from the source, the vocal cords. Try not to say M or hum. Don't let any air into the mouth. And you're using a slightly bratty stance, which means the larynx is just coming up a little bit, but it's locked into position. This helps you find the connection and helps you balance the larynx. And if you feel a gentle downward tension from the tongue muscle, great. If you feel more like a swallow sensation, mentally turn this to jello and just squinch it out. I don't even think squinch is a word, but that's what we're using. Now notice what happens when you do that. So when we swallow, the larynx elevates, the area underneath the chin becomes very active. And many singers who flip demonstrate a very similar upward gripping behavior in this region during the transition. And over time and with extended use, this area of the body can get tense and tight, and it feels uncomfortable. This is one of the reasons why. Now, by keeping your thumbs in place here, you'll be able to phonate and monitor that area. And if you feel excessive tightening, gripping, or pulling, you can mentally release it. Think of this muscle like jello, soft, relaxed, responsive. Not that it doesn't come down a little bit, that is fine. But again, we don't want it to feel like we're swallowing. And we're not trying to freeze the larynx. We're simply reducing excessive gripping behavior that destabilizes that coordination. So if you can do this at any time you're using sounds and on staccato sounds, it's very, very effective. And then you'll find, like, when you use the dopey, you don't really need to feel here because the larynx is down anyway. So, but this is for activating pitch, when you're using them. And one of the ways, if you can't find this sound and it still goes to one of the ways you can find this is by bringing your tongue out like this and keep it out, and without biting it or letting the tongue come back in, try to swallow. It's pretty much impossible to do. And that's because when the tongue is forward like that, the larynx can't lift. And if the larynx can't lift, you can't swallow. And if the larynx can't lift, those vocal cords stand a really good chance of staying connected, and you'll learn to oscillate or vibrate the cords into pitch without that strain. So if you want to find that sound, you can use an ugly ah, like apple. So I'm through my transition now, and it's relatively easy. As ugly as it sounds, it's easy. And just like when we use a dopey stance, we want to, as soon as possible, get it more back to a neutral, like speech level stance. The same with this exercise. You can, over time, begin to bring your tongue in a little bit more, till it's finally maybe sitting on top of your bottom teeth. So I'm giving each note the same attention. And I'm sometimes I imagine I'm swinging a little tiny hammer, and every note gets the same attention. It's slightly more aggressive, but because the note is so short, there's no strain. And because it's so short, we're really attaching positive muscle memory quickly. And then once that starts to feel comfortable, you could do staccato up, legato down. And again, using as much extreme tongue position as you need to. So you sort of have to be aware of what is happening when you listen or record your voice. And then we begin to get that legato stance, that smooth linking of the notes. Bring the tongue in a little bit. And you can hear that slight bratty sound. That's a slightly lifted larynx, and we're sort of locking it into position. It assists with thinning out the cords so we don't lose the connection. So for flippers, there's more than one way to come to this place of balance. Both remedies I've demonstrated so far have involved an imposition of the larynx, one lowered and dopey, and one slightly bratty and raised. And eventually, again, we want to bring that to neutral. So it's just more normal. And over time, you'll be able to pull out dopey or bratty like tools in your belt that you just bring out at will. Once awareness improves, we need to build balance, right? So there's several things that we can do, and these next demonstrations, they balance airflow and vocal fold closure, and we use them to warm up. We use them to find melody and pitch. We use them to strengthen the voice's ability to find and keep connections. And one of them is the semi-occluded vocal tract exercise where we use the singing straw. And there's a link in the app to the singing straw in the health section. And I've got the I guess they call the pro version. There's 3 different sizes. But basically, what this does is it lengthens the vocal tract by the length of this straw, which is metal. And you place it between your lips, and you keep your tongue attached to your bottom teeth, and you fill your cheeks. And you create this pressure above the vocal folds that balances to the subglottal pressure from the lungs. And it cushions the closure of the cords, and it allows you to exaggerate dopey and bratty positions freely. So when you could change the scale. So that B feels a little taxing, but I can maybe change the position of my larynx, maybe slightly bratty. It just flew right in there. Woo! And it takes me in. So this becomes a really excellent exercise. Now, if you don't have a straw, not to panic. Teeth or tongue on bottom teeth, fill the cheeks. And now, this pressure above the vocal cords really helps take the weight off the cords, while at the same time allowing you to engage them a little bit more aggressively. Liken it to clapping your hands underwater. It really does work. So anytime you're doing this on a sustained pattern, you are singing. So if you're using a tool that makes it easier, alleviates your flip or any other tends to you have, you're memorizing pitch control and placement, so it's a win-win. So anytime you're exercising, if you make it clinical and deliberate, you're going to maintain muscle memory faster, right? So these are several things that you can do if you're a flipper to help you find the connection without losing the connection. So there's the concentrations that you have to look at, whether that's your breath flow, your cord closure, the position of your larynx, and of course the vowels you're shaping are going to contribute to how easy it is to keep the connection. So the non-articulate, semi-occluded vocal tract exercises are really conducive to finding and keeping that connection without the flip. In closing, most flippers are not broken voices. They are voices that have not yet learned to stay balanced through the transition. The goal is not to force chest voice higher. The goal is to keep the coordination balanced through movement. If you found this webinar helpful, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. That support helps me continue creating these webinars and training resources for singers. And if you'd like guided workouts designed specifically for flippers, including interval training, coordination exercises, vocal analysis, and complete male and female voice training paths, check out the Virtual Voice Coach app available for iOS and Android. If you're a flipper, your voice isn't telling you to stop. It's telling you what needs attention. The transition revealed the tendency. Now it's time to train the remedy. Sing for yourself.